There's a shiver that lives in the woods, just behind the layer of trees that edge our town like guardians or witnesses, never sure which. I can feel it now, sliding beneath my skin as I tell you about the day we ventured too far into those woods. None of us deserved what we found there, but maybe that's the grip of youthful invincibility, of thinking the world bends to your rules. That arrogance led us to Jacob's Folly, an abandoned mansion that stood like a forgotten wound in the forest. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a grand adventure, a memory to laugh about over beers in a year or two. But there's no laughter left in our stories now. I remember the way the sunlight seemed to lose itself in the tangled branches as we tramped through the woods. The air was thick with the smell of damp moss and decaying leaves, a scent almost too rich, too alive. There were 4 of us: me, Tommy, Evie, and Rich. We'd all heard the whispers about Jacob's Folly, how it was built by some recluse 100 years ago, but he was never seen again. The mansion had stood ever since, slowly dissolving into the landscape. It drew us like moths, curiosity burning hotter than common sense. The closer we got, the quieter things became. I don't recall hearing a single bird or even the rustle of small animals you'd expect out there. Just our footsteps, crunching on the carpet of fallen leaves. And then we saw it, a structure not as grand as we'd imagined, but imposing enough. Its faded brickwork and shattered windows looked out like empty sockets, drawing you into the emptiness behind them. My pulse quickened as we walked up the uneven path to the door. For a second, I imagined the mansion was breathing, patiently waiting. Thick ivy climbed the stone walls like a smothering hand, the wood of the door warped but holding. Rich, ever the bravest, or maybe the most foolish, reached out first, his fingers brushing aside the web of cider veins stretching across the handle. He hesitated and then looked back at us with a grin that faltered into something else. Doubt, perhaps, or the beginning of fear. When the door creaked open, it wasn't with the usual loud protest of old hinges. It was subtle, like a sigh of resignation. Cool, stale air slipped past us, carrying a faint scent that reminded me of wet earth and something more rancid underneath. We stepped into a stale cavern of shadows. Dust motes swirled in the shafts of light breaking through gaps in the boarded windows. It wasn't silent inside. The house groaned and settled like an old creature remembering movement. Tommy made a joke about getting tetanus and Evie elbowed him, but there wasn't much laughter behind it. The mansion seemed to press in on us, walls leaning closer like secrets begging to be shared. As we moved through the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, though I knew it was impossible. The house hadn't been touched for decades, untouched by hands or things that breathed. Yet every creak we made on the old floorboards seemed to echo longer than it should, as if trying to communicate something. That's when I saw it, a door at the far end of the corridor, slightly ajar, beckoning us onward. I felt a pull toward it, a curiosity that was almost a command. We exchanged glances, silently agreeing to go further. Somewhere behind us, the front door we came through whispered closed with a finality that turned my stomach tight. I tried to shake the sense of foreboding, focusing instead on the peeling wallpaper that clung desperately to the walls, the patterns lost to time. We passed rooms where light shifted uneasily, stirring shadows that didn't seem to belong to anything. There was one room where dust lay so thick, stepping through it left trails like those on the moon. Evie hesitated at that one and made a sign against the door frame as though to ward off whatever might linger there. I was grateful for her superstition, even if I didn't understand it. Rich was the first to speak again, his voice loud enough to chase away whatever corners had ears. He suggested that we split up to cover more ground, typical strategy for us when exploring. But this time, the suggestion seemed heavier, carrying an unspoken challenge. We knew better, the tales of unlucky groups that tried to conquer places like this alone. The stories never ended well for those unfortunate souls. Yet pressure mounted between us until it felt like splitting was less a choice and more an inevitable step. With reluctant consent, we parted, agreeing to meet back at the door in 10 minutes. I watched Evie disappear into the gloom of one corridor, while Rich and Tommy, jesting to disguise their nerves, peeled off to inspect doorways leading elsewhere. I stood there a moment longer, drinking in the depth of the silence they'd left behind. It was only me now in that pulse-stopping quiet. I could hear my heartbeat loud as a drum in that uncanny stillness, a primitive thrum-th. It sang at a frequency only the house seemed to answer. At least, that's what I told myself as I turned back toward that inviting door, intent on understanding what hid behind it. The hallway stretched longer, twisted somehow, its end unfurling in unpredictable patterns. It was as if the mansion read my unease and relished every second of it. I hesitated, my feet feeling weighted with an inexplicable reluctance, and then forced myself on. There was a desire in the air around me now. It pushed at me subtly, like currents in a silent sea, and despite the looming sense of wrongness, I followed, not knowing what lay at the end of this corridor, whether it was freedom, revelation, or something best left unfound. I never should have agreed to separate from the others. As soon as their footsteps faded into the creaky corridors of the mansion, I felt acutely alone. The air seemed to thicken, oppressive and cold, clinging to my skin like a damp shroud. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, each beat a reminder of my isolation within those ancient, decaying walls. I tried to focus on the task at hand, exploring the western wing, a part of the house none of us had dared to enter before. The wallpaper here was peeling, revealing a web of cracks that ran through the plaster like veins in rotting flesh. A musty smell invaded my nostrils, a concoction of mildew and something indescribably foul, like the stench of forgotten things that should remain undisturbed. The hallway stretched before me, longer than it had any right to be. Doors lined either side, some ajar, others closed tight as if guarding whatever lay behind them. I hesitated, a wave of apprehension making my mouth dry, but curiosity, a relentless itch, pushed me forward. The first room I entered was a library, or at least what used to be one. Empty shelves loomed like skeletons in the dim light, filtering through grimy windows, casting sinister shadows that danced ominously across the floor. A thick layer of dust lay undisturbed upon a solitary desk. It looked as if no one had entered in decades. I approached it, my footsteps muted by an old, threadbare rug. On the desk, I found a journal, its leather cover cracked and faded, yet somehow magnetic. I picked it up, the pages fragile and yellowed, filled with elegant script that spoke of a time and place long forgotten. There were entries about the mansion's original inhabitants, people whose names meant nothing to me, but whose lives were inexplicably intertwined with the house's fate. Each entry grew darker as I turned the pages. What began as mundane notes on daily life and upkeep gradually shifted towards a madness I could almost feel crawling from the paper. Descriptions of peculiar noises at night, shadows that moved without cause, and a growing sense of being watched. I shivered and placed the journal back, unnerved by the uncanny parallels with my own situation. Leaving the library, I ventured further down the hall, my hand trailing along the rough, fraying wall for comfort. The air seemed to grow colder with each step, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn to something, or perhaps something was coming for me. I stopped at another door, slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I was greeted by a nursery, untouched and obscurely poignant with its faded pastel colors and ancient toys scattered across the floor. On a rocking chair sat a doll, its porcelain face cracked in a grotesque parody of innocence, eyes staring blankly at something only it could see. A sudden noise made me jump, a creak, as if someone else had just stepped into the room. But I was alone. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as the rocking chair began to move gently back and forth, as if propelled by an unseen hand. I stumbled backwards, heart in my throat, unable to tear my eyes away as the doll's head slowly turned to face me. The room felt suffocating, panic clawed at the edges of my mind, urging me to flee. I backed out of the nursery, keeping my gaze fixed on that awful, serene doll until the door closed between us, cutting off the sight but not the feeling of its stare. Breathless, I retraced my steps to the main hall where Ian and Sarah had gone. My mind raced with thoughts of warning them, but the words felt stuck, useless, caught in a muddle of fear. It was then I noticed something strange. The layout of the house had changed. Where there had been a corridor leading back to the foyer, there was now only wall, seamless and unmarked, stretching endlessly. Dread pressed down on me, an inescapable weight. I pounded the wall, hoping it might yield, but it responded with a dull, mocking thud. The house was alive, playing some insidious game I couldn't understand. I had to find my friends to regroup, but each turn led me only deeper, into parts of the mansion none of us had seen. With every door that wouldn't open, every twisted hallway that seemed to loop back on itself, I felt a rising panic. The realism. Tian hit me with cold clarity. I'd never find the others, not in this shifting maze designed to confound and isolate. A distant sound echoed, a soft voice, a whisper at the edge of hearing. It wasn't one of my friends, it was something else. Something ancient and malevolent that resided in Jacob's Folly. As I stood there, pulse pounding, I understood the journal's eerie descent into madness. The mansion was a predator, and we were its prey, unwittingly caught in its web. I had to keep moving, keep searching, but each step felt like I was walking into the jaws of something unspeakable. I turned and ran, blindly plunging into the unknown depths of the mansion, driven by a primal instinct to survive. Behind me, the whispering grew louder, closer, as the house shifted around me, closing in like an ancient, patient hunter. The search for my friends became secondary to the fight for my own sanity, each moment stretching into eternity, as I spiraled deeper into the claustrophobic embrace of Jacob's Folly. The very walls whispering secrets I dared not understand. The worst part is the silence, not the screams that never seem to echo back, nor the banging that's more like fists pounding on the inside of my skull, demanding to be let out. It's the absence of everything familiar, the comfort of a friend's voice, the grounding touch of another hand. Each breath feels stolen, the air too heavy as if it's aware of the weight of my thoughts. Alone in the madness, that silence becomes a constant companion, stretching endlessly like the hallways themselves. I find myself back in the room with the rocking chair, though I can't remember how I got here. It's all mismatched moments and fragmented time now. The chair creaks in rhythm, an unnerving lullaby, yet it remains empty. That tattered journal lies open on the floor, pages fluttering without a breeze. Words scribbled across lines seem to mock me, dark and looping, a language I no longer recognize. It's no comfort, just another piece of the puzzle I can't fit together. The house breathes too, I realize. A long, exhaling sigh that rattles the windows but leaves the curtains untouched. It inhales in the pauses between my panicked thoughts, like it's tasting my fear, savoring the flavor of it. Each corner turned reveals another layer of its sickening intent. I stumble into rooms that are not where they should be, where they never were before. A bedroom without a bed, just walls lined with portraits of people trapped behind painted eyes. Their gazes follow me, accusing or desperate, I can't decide. Whispers, I hear them now. Not the voices of my friends or frantic echoes of my own despair, but something else, something older. An undertone vibrating through the wooden bones of this place. It's like a language forgotten by time, etched into the very timbers that hold this nightmare together. No matter how I try, I can't quite grasp the meaning, but the sensation it leaves in my gut is undeniable, primal, and deeply wrong. In an attempt to escape, I fling open the wardrobe doors, seeking refuge or revelation. Instead, a chilling draft snakes out, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and rot. The clothes inside shift, as if an invisible wind stirs them, though there's no breeze here, only the oppressive closeness. I slam it shut, shutting out whatever lurks within, but not before I catch sight of the reflection. My eyes look back, but they aren't my own, not anymore. There's an emptiness there, a void that glimmers in the dim light. I realize the truth when the whispers peak, a crescendo that fills my head, drowns out every thought until there's only clarity left. These are not memories or hauntings of a past gone awry. The house doesn't capture souls, it feeds on them, knitting them into itself, expanding the labyrinth with each trapped life. We're more than prey, we're sustenance, fuel for its immortal hunger. I understand now what I must do. The resolve is a cold thing, a hard, unyielding stone in the pit of my stomach. It won't let me falter. I gather fragments of glass from a shattered picture frame, the edges sharp enough to bite into flesh. Trembling, I carve into the wall, letting the blood follow the jagged lines I trace. It drinks it up eagerly, the wood swallowing the crimson stains like a thirsty desert. With each slice, the whispers change, becoming more like a wail, a protest that drowns under the weight of my grip. Somewhere deep in the heart of this beast, I feel a shift, a groan like timbers straining under the burden of centuries. The rocking chair stills, and silence falls again, deeper now, punctuated only by the hammering of my heart. I drop the glass, wipe my hands on my jeans, leaving streaks of red that mimic the journal's mad patterns. But now, at least, I can see the path, a narrow corridor lined with flickering shadows, promising an exit, or perhaps another loop in this twisted snare. I take it, steps unsure, senses alert, feeling the pulse of the walls as they close in behind me. They don't rush, but rather constrict slowly, as if savoring this last act, my desperate dash for freedom within its bowels. The door appears, real or imagined doesn't matter anymore. It's framed by moonlight that filters through cracked glass. I reach for the handle, hands slick with sweat and blood. It's cold, cold enough to anchor me, if only for a moment. Beyond it is nothingness or salvation, the answer to the question my whole being strains against. I twist and pull, the hinges screeching in protest. The outside air rushes in, clean, cool, and laden with the scent of night. All that remains is the decision. To step through and face whatever waits beyond this threshold, or to stay, to forever wander these haunted halls, another shade within the architecture of a living nightmare. But as the door creaks open, that whispering subsides, leaving only a thought, a chilling promise. You can leave, but you'll never be free. It's a seed planted deep, roots coiling tight around my heart, a darkness waiting to bloom. As I cross the threshold, I can't help but wonder if it was really me who made it out, or if another part of me still roams those shifting hallways, bound to the hunger that always remains.